this lesson, I want to speak about evaluating action learning projects, why this is necessary, the methods that might be used, and the challenges that might be encountered along the way. Action learning projects are characterised by their complexity, their fluidity, and very often by their lack of a defined outcome at the start. Add to this a diverse group of participants, students, teachers, community representatives, local citizens, public officials, etc., and it can become a real challenge to evaluate these projects. Despite this challenge, however, it is extremely important to attempt to understand the value, effects and impact that these projects have on all participants. For the students, they need to understand what they have learnt in terms of skills and knowledge and the value of that learning towards their ongoing education and future careers. For the external partners, they need to understand the benefits of these collaborations in order to justify dedicating the often scant resources they have to these projects. For the academic institutions, they need to be certain that the external collaborations are carried out ethically, with academic rigour, and to the mutual benefit of all taking part. So my experience of evaluating action learning projects is based on many years teaching live projects at Sheffield School of Architecture and, more recently, collaborating on a European network research project, Urban Education Live. In live projects, groups of Masters in Architecture students work with community clients on real design projects. We've been running the programme for 19 years, with 190 projects so far completed, 1,700 students engaged across 15 different countries. We have built up a wealth of experience and tacit knowledge in the process, but it's only recently that we have had the capacity to formalise the evaluation of these projects. The UEL project connects academic partners in Finland, Slovenia and Romania, all working on collaborative action learning projects in their host cities. This research gives us the opportunity to share knowledge across the network, and this includes the sharing and testing of evaluation methods. 3 key points have emerged as we have developed systems to evaluate our action learning projects. Firstly, the importance of framing the projects as mutual learning mechanisms for all concerned and recognising the value of the project processes as well as the project outputs. Secondly, the importance of implementing a diverse range of feedback methods so that voices from as many actors across the project can be captured. Thirdly, the importance of evaluating both in the short term and in the long term. I will now go into these points in more detail. Framing the projects. So by introducing the projects to both the students and their external partners as mutual learning mechanisms, the scene is set for open-ended, exploratory dialogue and co-production. Embedding an attitude of learning across all participants from the start of the project results in much more reflective and critical feedback from all concerned at the end of the project. This allows the impact of the processes and not just the outputs of the project to be fully evaluated. And the second, diverse methods. We employ a range of methods at different stages of the projects to try to ensure feedback from many voices and enable us to evaluate the full impact of the projects. We do interim reflection sessions. Project mentors encourage the students and external partners through informal group sessions to reflect upon the project processes at regular intervals throughout the project. Public engagement. The challenge is to ensure that marginalised groups have the capacity to also give feedback on projects. It is important to reach out to those who do not have the loudest voices or hold positions of power within the communities we work with. We support our students to hold accessible, inclusive and engaging public events in order to gather feedback from as many citizens as possible. As with all action learning projects, the collection of data from participants is vital, and we train our students to do this safely and ethically. We do public presentations, and these are at the end of the projects, where students present their work in a public venue to their peers and their external partners, focusing mostly on the outputs of the project. External partners are then invited to give feedback at the end of the event, and the day often ends in a celebratory meal. Presentations are assessed in terms of their professionalism, their clarity and their design content. In reflective reviews, which follow the public event, these are much more introspective discussions within the student group. Students are encouraged to reflect critically and honestly with their mentors upon their learning and how well they met challenges and the value of the skills learnt towards future practice. And then we also gather written feedback. At the end of the projects, external partners are invited to fill in questionnaires to gain detailed feedback on the impact of the project. These are supplemented by feedback sheets from the mentors. And then the third, the need to evaluate short-term and long-term impact. Sometimes only after several years does the full impact of action learning reveal itself. This is why it's important to keep going back to students and external partners, if possible months and years after the initial evaluation is done. So why is it so important to evaluate over the long term as well as the short term? Fleming and Flint explain how the effects of learning processes become more complex over time. In the short term, we can understand the simple outputs of measurable gains, and yet only over time do the complex impacts of learning show themselves in changes of behaviour, practice and perception. These complexities can only be revealed through qualitative and synthetic evaluation methods. We have recently introduced two mechanisms by which students are asked to reflect back upon their action learning experience later in the course. The first is an essay where they are asked to reflect upon the management processes of the LIFE project and place these in relation to their experience in practice, thus drawing out learning points for their future practice. The second occurs a full year later when final year students run a reflective session for new students as they embark upon their first LIFE project. And also through the UEL project, we've also embarked upon focus group meetings and semi-structured interviews where we ask external partners and students to evaluate their past action learning experiences, sometimes up to 10 years later. These in-depth sessions are revealing those complex impacts where distinct shifts in the capacity of community groups and the practice of graduates can be identified. We see parallels between the shift in understanding from outputs to outcomes to impact as defined by Fleming and Flint to the triad of consequences of co-design identified by Ezio Manzini. He advocates for long-term, creative and situated co-design projects that evolve in response to the development of participants' knowledge, relationships, agency and capacity. The consequence of this deep engagement will shift from problem solving in the short term through sense making in the medium term until in the long term transformation is achieved. Here we map these systems against each other to visualise the growth in complexity, networks and practices that are being revealed through our evaluation of LIFE projects. Parle and Facer call for a recognition of the value of co-produced impact. That is, collaboration should not be confined merely to the design and delivery of a project, but continue into its evaluation. As discussed at the start of this talk, evaluating action learning projects in all of their diversity, complexity and fluidity is a challenging task. However, we have found that taking the time to learn, reflect, critique and evaluate with students, teachers, partners and local citizens has revealed layers and subtleties of impact that were previously hidden.